Hey folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about the third and final book in the Tamir Triad by Lynn Flewelling, The Oracle's Queen. So this was an absolutely fascinating finale to what's been an absolutely fascinating series. This book has come over the years. This book has repeatedly come up as a must-read within the fantasy genre, especially among backlist releases, and I it, I'm pretty depressed at this point that I waited this long to experience this book for this series for the first time. It's really engrossing. It's really fascinating. Lynn Flewelling is clearly a very talented writer in the way she just fuses so many things that are just uncommon to see in epic fantasy. The way she just brings it all, incorporates all, and fuses it all into a very creative take on what's a very common staple of the fantasy genre, epic fantasy. That is, because first and foremost, these books are very much epic fantasy. So, what happens in the Oracle's Queen? So this picks up pretty much at the end of Hidden Warrior. Tobin had the magic that was used to transform Tobin has been burned away, and she's now revealed. She's now taken the name of Tamir, and she's now fully acknowledged as a princess. Of course, this is met with varying degrees of skepticism and disbelief, and the entire book is pretty much about her coming to grips with the change, which was involuntary for the. It was very much an involuntary change throughout, and now trying to take her place as the rightful ruler of the throne, and dealing with the inevitable consequences of that. So yeah, that kind of makes it sound. That's not a good description of what this book is about. Maybe just check the blurb online. But essentially, this is a conclusion to an epic fantasy trilogy. This is a war for the throne, between the rightful heir and the line of the usurper, and it gets everything you would expect. There's full-on war. There are battles. There's just madness that grips the one side of the conflict. There's just the raw emotion, because throughout these books, Lynn Flewelling wrote very character-driven stories, and throughout these books, we saw the friendships that formed between the huge cast of characters, just the relationships and the friendships that formed, and the way that these bonds are now tested and splintered and broken on both sides and by both sides. So it's just wonderful. But for the most part, this book is largely about Tamir trying to figure out who she is now as a person, coming to grips with the body that she's in, and just trying to figure out what works best for her. What's going to be her, how is she going to live her life moving forward. And it was really fascinating to read. One of the things I actually liked about this book is that when she comes forward and she reveals herself as Tobin, who's now been the magic that turned her into a boy was burnt away, and she's now revealed as the princess that she was. She's met with everything from acceptance to skepticism to disbelief to denial to outright hostility. The full gamut she's met with. And why I say it I enjoyed that is because it's a very realistic portrayal for me, I would think. Just from the stories you read on, you see online from people who've been in similar situations, who've transitioned, that kind of thing, and the reason why I say it was well done is because I recently remember a book where I can't even recall the book right now, where a similar situation, or was it a story, whatever it was, a similar situation happened essentially, and this person was just met with widespread acceptance, which was completely unrealistic. I get that in that decision, in that particular story, the author chose to not incorporate bigotry, because simply by incorporating it, you can kind of help to propel those ideas, which is not something that we don't want to perpetuate, but at the same time it's not realistic. And I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, this is fantasy. Like, there's not, it's debatable how realistic things should be, but for the purposes of this kind of story, I think a more realistic portrayal is the better approach, and I appreciate that that's the direction that Lynn Flewelling took with this book. So a lot of it was just kind of watching Tamir kind of try and figure out who she is now, coming to grips with she's led her entire life thinking she's a boy, not just living as a boy, thinking she's a boy, which is a big difference between with other stories where the character where a character would essentially be cross-dressing, hidden as somebody else. So, it's like she was never told the truth of herself, and now she has to come to grips not just with this, but with her feelings, and not just that, but the feelings that she's been having throughout the series that she now has a whole new context to apply to. So it was pretty fascinating. Like I said, the big pull of these books is very much that these are character-driven stories, and no more so than this one. Like, this is the most fascinating, the most compelling of the 3 books in the series so far. So there's that aspect of it. But like I said, this is very much epic fantasy at the end of the day. There is the massive conclusion you would expect an epic fantasy story where a throne is up for grabs. Like, the conflict that's basically been building up over the course of the second book, it very much does come to a head in a really, really great way. Yeah, like, I think that kind of summarizes everything you need to know about this book. Like, it's not like overly complicated. It's very straightforward in the overarching plot. The draw of these books is very much the character stories, and just the way, just so many different elements that Lynn Flewelling has been able to combine into these stories. Like, this is the first time I've ever seen gothic horror incorporated into an epic fantasy series, and just done so wonderfully. Well, like, she fuses so many different things. It's just great to read. Like, if you want to see what a fantasy LGBTQ story was like before the because this book was written like early 2000s. Like, if you want to see how that kind of story was written before, like, acceptance of that entire community was more widespread, this is the series to look at. It's just really well done. Whether that's your jam or not, I should say. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this book, to be honest. Brilliantly handled, brilliantly done. A wonderful wrap up to what's been a extremely fascinating series. Like, I didn't expect. I wouldn't call this series enjoyable because there's some pretty dark stuff that happens here, some pretty depressing things. Like, the situations that a few of these characters have gotten into is very horrific. I honestly can't say I enjoyed the series, but I was engaged. Like, I was just compelled to keep reading. I was just fascinated by how everything was, how it was executed. And I agree. Like, I agree with what I've heard about this series before I actually picked it up, which is that this is a series you have to read. If you're a fan of fantasy, you have to try this series. It's very different. It's very unique. It's very creative, and it's probably going to be very unforgettable. I don't see these books. These books are going to be living rent free in my brain for a very long time to come. Even in this day and age where LGBTQ in a fantasy novel has become pretty much the standard. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.